Please don't peck my legs, girl. Well, good morning. I'm Rebecca with the Cartage Farmstead, one half of the two old souls that are working to restore our homesteading heritage here in the foothills of South Carolina. Today I thought I'd take you around our suburban homestead, our urban farm plot, and give you an idea for how you don't have to have a whole bunch of land in order to actually homestead. The homesteading is much more of a mindset of trying to be more self-sufficient, building community around you, and being resourceful with what you have more than having a whole bunch of acreage and a certain type of cattle and a dairy cow and a goat and all those things. That you can do it with much less land and start where you are. We live in a very normal suburban neighborhood. We have neighbors on both sides of us. So we don't have a whole lot of land we're working with. We do try to keep in mind that our neighbors do appreciate a nice well-kept lawn, so we don't do a whole lot of gardening up front. We put a lot of our pretty ornamentals that we enjoy for cut flowers up front. And then behind the fence back there, we're going to take a look at the homestead side. You do have a bit of backyard space. There's different types of small livestock that work great in a suburban setting that fit perfectly in a backyard. For example, we have a flock of backyard chickens. You see Mama Elsie is not a big fan of my boots. Please don't peck my legs, girl. But we have a fairly normal sized backyard for the suburbs. And we built a little chicken coop out back that can keep our flock of, I think we have 12 chickens, not counting the little chicks. And it takes up about half of our backyard, and we still have the rest for the dog to run around in, still have the classic fire pit out here. So it doesn't have to take up a ton of space, and if it's well managed, we bring in a lot of wood mulch that we get free from tree trimming companies to put on top of their chicken run periodically, and it helps keep smell down. You never smell them. If you have all hens, like these ladies, the only noise they make is when they lay an egg or they spot a hawk in the sky. So they're fairly quiet to have in a neighborhood. One thing you want to keep in mind though is check the zoning laws in your HOA. When I was buying our current house here at the Cottage Farmstead, I told my realtor I was looking for a particular type of zoning that would allow me to have a flock of chickens in the backyard with some regulations. Sometimes HOAs do or do not allow you. You might have to lobby it. I had a friend that had to work with the city council where she was to get chickens allowed. So there are ways where you can start adding chickens to your backyard. If you don't want chickens, you can do things like rabbits, quail, and if you have a big enough yard, you could probably get away with doing pigs using the classic pig port that Justin Rhodes has developed. You don't have to have a ton of space if you manage them properly. And sometimes you don't have the ideal setting for growing vegetables in your backyard. Behind me is our south-facing side. That's where all of our sun comes from. And guess what? It's covered all by trees. So we really can't grow a lot of sun-loving crops here. We've tried growing some cherry tomatoes, we'll get a few. Tried growing cucumbers, we'll get a few, but it doesn't grow great here. So we'll be taking you later, hopefully after it stops raining, we'll take you to our urban farm plot that we have bartered with in order to grow some vegetables in a sunnier patch. But we did decide to take advantage of what we do have here, and we grow our herb garden. So down here we have our sage, our thyme, we got lemon balm, some rosemary down here. So we take advantage of what space we do have. Herbs don't need quite as much sunlight as a big slicing tomato. So we do utilize every square inch that we have to grow as much food as we can, even if it's not ideal for vegetable growing. A lot of time people get caught up thinking that in order to be a true homesteader, you have to have grown every single piece of fruit that you're putting into your jars, into your freezer, that for some reason that if you didn't grow it yourself, you can't preserve it. But that's not true. You can buy things on sale at the farmer's market when they're in season and still preserve it and build that self-sufficiency into your lifestyle, and all of that is homesteading. Right now we don't have any fruit trees, but we do can applesauce every year. As you can see, we have quite a few jars left over from last year. We build relationships with local orchards. There's a vineyard as well that has grapes and berries, and we build relationships with them, and we ask for their seconds, things that they're not going to be able to sell at the market, and then we pay them a reduced price for something that they would have just sent to the compost heap. And then we're able to turn it into applesauce to feed us throughout the year. So herbs are an example of something that you can grow at home no matter how much land you have, even if you just have a balcony at an apartment complex. You can grow your own herbs, you can dry them and preserve them. It actually saves you a lot of money. It's one of the best self-sufficient things you can start doing, even in a small space, is herbs cost a lot of money when you buy them in those little jars at the store. And you can grow these for a whole lot less and dry them even just in an oven, even if you don't have a dehydrator. So if your goal is to ultimately have some acreage and live out in the rural areas, you'll probably want to start learning now how to keep a well-stocked pantry, because the grocery stores are not going to be quite as close. It also saves a lot of money when you're able to buy things in bulk, especially if you're considering one of you or both of you staying on the homestead full-time. You want to find ways to start saving money. And so one of the ways that we do so here is by buying things in large bulk bags, restocking our pantry in the kitchen, working pantry in the kitchen, as we need it. And then when we're planning our meals for the coming week, we take a look at what we have in our pantry, plan our meals around it, and that way we're not going to the store for every little thing. That saves us on gas, saves us on time, and saves us some money as well. So something to keep in mind if you're planning a living way out in the boonies. Another way to start homesteading wherever you are is to pick up some different DIY projects, some handicrafts. Farmer Nathan discovered last year that he really enjoys doing spoon carving. So we get to have these beautiful spoons. We're not reliant on the store for beautiful pieces around the house. It's inexpensive. I mean, it's just a piece of wood that we had out back that he carved into it. I enjoy knitting in the winter, so I can make a lot of our hats, mittens and things like that at home, and so we're not as reliant on stores and manufacturing. Granted, I do need to buy the yarn from somewhere, but we do know some people locally that raise sheep for yarn, so we can start building those relationships now even when we don't have our own land. And adding to these skill sets is a great way to prepare yourself for having a land someday. We have practiced different carpentry skills. We get pallet wood for cheap, and we've built chicken tractors, which I'll link below to the build for that. And as we're learning those things, it'll help us scale up in the future if we want to have, 50, 100 meat birds at one time. If we need to build a barn, well, at least we know how to build a bench to start with. So starting small, wherever you are. And homesteading is not something that you go out and you just do it all by yourself, 100% independent, you don't need anybody around you. Homesteading actually involves a lot of community, because we are not capable of growing everything ourselves, either based on climate or, like I showed you earlier, outside we have a whole bunch of trees on the south side of our house, so we can't grow a lot of sun-loving crops here. So building relationships with people that have different types of animals than us, different hobbies that we have, and have better growing climates for different crops enables us to get a lot of stuff locally without having to rely on the grocery store, but not having to grow it ourselves either. For example, down the street we have a neighbor that has honeybees, and so we get honey from him. We sell eggs to some friends, we get some cash, and then we just trade the cash for honey, and it's delicious. We also have a neighbor down the street that loves roasting coffee, and so we trade some of the produce from our garden for his delicious coffee. Actually, I don't like coffee. Nathan loves coffee, but it does smell really good. And like I mentioned when we were looking at the pantry earlier, learning how to manage a pantry to help save money is a great idea, especially if you're wanting to bring one or both of you home to live on the homestead full-time or at least part-time. You're gonna have to learn how to live off a little bit less. So one of those ways is start getting out of debt, learning how to budget, start finding more economical ways to do things yourself. A lot of DIY projects, we make our own cleaners, things to save money so that we don't have to keep putting money out. So it enables us to stay at home and not have to trade our time for money. One of the attractions that most of us have to homesteading is like the simple life. And one of the components of that is kind of escaping the consumeristic society that we're a part of. And that means we're not going to be spending as much money. So we're having to start learning how to enjoy the simple things, like a delicious cup of coffee that you can make at home, rather than going out and trading money for one from, say, Starbucks. So learning how to cook foods from scratch is another great way to homestead wherever you are, no matter the kitchen size. You don't have to necessarily grow everything. We did grow this okra out of our garden, but we've also bought okra from other locals that had surplus and put it into our meals. Learning how to cook from scratch enables you to make a lot more meals at home. It's a lot more affordable. You can cook out of your pantry easier and plan your meals based on what's growing in the season rather than relying on the grocery store to provide you with most of your food. Another way to homestead when you don't have your own land is to barter or lease to use someone else's land. So behind me is one of the locations for Growing Green Family Farms. And when they first took over this farm, Farmer Nathan and I volunteered to help clear out all the chaos. It was covered in like 3-foot tall grass everywhere. The greenhouse was overgrown with tomatoes that were like 50 feet tall. So we helped clean it up, and in exchange we get to use a back section of the plot for our own family garden. So in this much sunnier section we have approximately 25 by 30 foot garden area, and we have it divided up into 4 sections where we have beans, we have our squash quadrant, we have our tomato section, and then we have our corn section. And then in the front of that we have a row that we have a lot of medicinal and culinary herbs. Then we also interplant for companion planting as well. This is one of the ways that we're able to grow a lot of our own food without owning a lot of acreage with great fields and perfect sunlight, is that we're able to borrow land about 10 minutes away from our house and come out a couple times a week to tame the weeds, harvest, and that sort of thing. So even though you may not own a lot of land just yet, you can use other people's land. You can maybe make lease arrangements. Maybe they'll take payment from part of the harvest. My sister-in-law had pigs that they raised in someone else's woods for a period of time in exchange for some of the meat. So there's different ways to go about using other people's land while you wait for your own. I hope you enjoyed walking around our urban homestead and getting some ideas on how you can start homesteading and becoming more self-sufficient right where you are. Down below I'm going to link to a whole bunch of different things on how to cook from scratch, make your own cleaners, how to start a self-sufficient garden, how to start an herb garden indoors. Lots of great places to get ideas for how to homestead no matter where you are.